one, we don't put kids in that position in the first place, but two, when they get in that position, what can we do to better serve them? So with that in mind, we started seeking educational programs in schools that could better serve those kids who had dropped out or who were at severe risk of dropping out. We wanted to do three things. We wanted to expand the number of seats that we could offer those kids that would best meet their needs. But we also didn't want to lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, we need to make sure that all of our schools are high quality. And so we wanted to raise the bar for services and programs in schools that served kids who were at risk. And we also knew that we needed to do a better job of reaching out and engaging those kids, going and finding those students who felt like their only option was to drop out, and to help them understand that there were programs and schools out there in their communities that could best serve them.
One of the things that's important to us is to not go into a community blind, but to connect with some entity in the community that's working there already. About a year ago, we did a presentation to the board of the network of Woodlawn, which included several community stakeholders, some of which are here. If any of them are here, you can just wave your hand. I know a few of them are here from the board of the network of Woodlawn. As well, and I know the Alderman was present at the meeting, and some folks from the University of Chicago and other community organizations were at this meeting. Is that better for you all in the back? Better? Okay. So again, we saw that there's a clear need. There's large numbers of young adults, young people, young men and women in the Woodlawn community who are currently not in school. And we know that if someone is not in school and your prospects of unemployment are very high, as a matter of fact, African American males between the ages of 15 and 25 have the highest rates of unemployment of any demographic group in the United States, somewhere around 80%. So if I'm not in school and I'm not working, what's left for me to do?
I'll stand here and say that if this comes to fruition, this is our role, and hopefully nobody can predict the future, but I think it's solid. So, number one, introduction. Fisk school closed last year, as we all know, as a result of the school closing plan. A critical part of ensuring that this location is suitable for Camelot's use, the network of Woodlawn, actually in this endeavor led by the Woodlawn Public Safety Alliance, went to law enforcement's top guy in this district. At the time, it was Commander Glenn Evans. Now it's Commander James Jones, and he's at the back of the room over to the right. My right, your left. And we asked him to review the data, the stats, in terms of the area in and around Fisk School. What he came back with, because we had our own data, we do, on a pretty consistent basis, collect our own data, massage it to where it makes sense to anybody that wants to see it, but we didn't want to just rely on that, so what we did was ask Commander Evans, because he's the top law enforcement guy in this community, to take a look at the area as well. What he came back with and told us is that if in fact that there were a Camelot type school, if Camelot was to open in this area, it would not pose a significant problem or any problem at all, as he saw it, in the footprint that the school is in and then the surrounding area. So the last part of this simply says, he concluded what I just said. He concluded that the area commonly referred to as Rock Creek, and that's the area that would create the most of the problems that everyone would be concerned about if the school were to be open, because it's within the immediate footprint. That it was stable from a crime perspective, and in his view, Camelot type school would not pose any significant problems. That was the commander for the 3rd District.
One is in the Inglewood community, one is in the Roseland community on 111th Street. And this past June, the two campuses combined graduated nearly 150 young people. 150 young people in those two communities graduated not with a GED, but with a high school diploma. And we have some of our current and former students here, and we're going to let you hear from them in a few minutes. Because to tell the story than a student who has lived it, than a young person who has experienced this program firsthand. Some of these things, but it's aligned to the curriculum of the district. And I want Mr. Booker and Ms. Folger to come up and just say a little bit about this piece before we go on. Mr. Charter mentioned the employment program that they have. Meeting actually with those young people who are going through that program. Many of them, probably most of them, fit the criteria of the young people that we're talking about. So again, there are more than enough young people here already in this community to fit the need of what we're trying to do here for this community.
Okay. Thank you very much. Another question came, why is a lease negotiated without input from the community about the use of the Fisk property? There is supposed to be a community process for deciding how close school buildings would be repurposed in various communities. I do not recall these decisions for Fisk to be leased as they have a different reference here. And I'm just going to put the right reference in here. Brazier Foundation has been openly discussed by residents in the neighborhood. I certainly do not remember a meeting where Camelot was discussed before the deal was made. Basic questions should be answered. What is the target enrollment? How many people will be hired? Fisk is a large property. How will we ensure that the new building will not be underutilized based on CPS definition? Was there a better purpose for the building and the space? That was never discussed by community. Another.
Wait, are we going to answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
CEO, question about the lease. Let's clear that up.
Good evening, I'm Tom Terrell, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for CPS and manage the repurposing process. So there is no lease.
At the last meeting, they stated it was signed. Alderman stated it was signed.
There's no lease, I'm telling you the facts. So there is no lease. We're in the process of negotiating the lease so that it would be ready in the event that the community chooses to have Camelot as their community preference.
But that's not the process that was laid out by CPS with all these school closings. That wasn't the process.
The process that was laid out by CPS referred to the schools that we were going to sell. This is intended to be a short-term lease process, so we've amended it so that we could get it open on time if in fact the community wants to go this way.
You've already changed the process.
I'm
It
sorry.
sounds like you already made a decision. I mean, you're trying to fast track this decision so that it could be open on time for the new school year.
If that were true, we wouldn't be having this meeting tonight. It's not a true statement. There is no pre-designated use for this. If the community prefers this use, then we will proceed down that path.
We were at a community meeting in July, and the alderman stated that the lease was signed, that he got information stating that there was a lease that was signed. And so I'm just trying to get clarity on what's, you're trying to get clarity.
I'm providing you clarity. I'm the guy that signs it, and it hasn't been signed. That's the fact.
Let me clarify that. It is in fact true that we were informed that the lease was signed. It was at a education committee meeting that I brought it to the CPS representative's attention that we wanted to see this signed lease, that Camelot had not showed up at a community meeting, and we wanted to get more information. It was at a subsequent meeting that we found out from the gentleman who was at Sierra that no lease had been signed, and it wouldn't be signed unless we had a community process. And that's where we are at right now. We are not, and the reason that Camelot was brought here, and we're not trying to fast track it. We wanted to bring, because Camelot and the Brazier Foundation had been working, Woodlawn Community Network of Woodlawn. The Network of Woodlawn has been engaged in this process. We wanted to bring it to you to determine whether or not it was something that we could go forward with in your opinion as Woodlawn residents. That is why we are not trying to push anything down you. We want you to have your input. That is why we call this meeting. That is why we call the last meeting. That is why we ask for clarity on this subject, So let's get it right. We asked for clarity on it. We have been informed. So what I said was based on what I knew then. What we're doing right now is based on information, accurate information that was provided with us. Okay? All right. Location where the school is, known as Rock Creek, is now has a continuous problem with crime, drug sales, disorder. How, in fact, is a continuous patrol not being done right now to address that, and why would it be in place when Camelot comes? No safety measures are in place right now to the liking of the neighbor. How would we address that? Commander, would you like to take that question? Mr. Lynch, CP, University of Chicago Police, how, in fact, are we going to address the crime issues that currently are in place and not being addressed, and being told that it could be done better after the school gets addressed?
We will use the same plans that we use at most of the schools in the third district. I'm not aware of any particular crimes or drug selling in that area right now. I'll look into it, but if Camelot did move there, we utilize their resources to monitor whatever they see going on at that time also. Increased patrols will naturally be in effect due to the fact that there's going to be children from various locations within the district going to that school. That should with any type of drug sales or whatever you see in that area.
Good evening. University of Chicago Police Department, Department of Regular Chicago Police. Definitely participation if the school is assigned to be placed there or whatever is placed there. The presence that we currently provide and the initiatives, partnerships will exist continuously. As Commander Jones stated, that we have information directly related to a specific problem that's been reported to us. We can address them through a task force and increased presence that we can utilize to address them.
Okay, there are two answers there. The other question, safety students expelled and dropped out. What precautions will be taken from these students crossing gang lines can create retaliation, more bloodshed? How will our community be safe? How will property and apartment owners protect property? Safety of children, safety of violence in the area. This is another safety issue. Safety is prevailing here.
What happened to all the questions that we asked at the beginning of the meeting?
I am going to be reading it if you let me. Am I reading these?
Please, there have been other questions submitted, ma'am.
But the other ones weren't answered.
There's other questions submitted, and we are going to get to them. If you just let me go through this question and answer period. Into normal schools is the question. CPS, why special schools and not integrated into normal schools?
So I think what we have learned is that now there isn't one solution that works for the challenge that we have in front of us. And so certainly we are working with our current high schools to make sure that we have fewer dropouts, that we have programs in place to make sure that there are fewer dropouts, that they have the resources that they need. However, when we looked at what we were doing, and we also looked across the country at people who were doing this work well, and earlier Mr. Mumfree showed you some of the studies that were done in some of the other places, organizations like Camelot are doing really good work. And it didn't make sense for us to try to reinvent the wheel if we knew that there was a good program with good people that we could bring to Chicago to help out our students right away.
But CPS's job is to educate students, not to guard that responsibility away from another company. So what do we need a Chicago Public Schools for if they're just going to barter that responsibility away to other private companies that are not accountable to the public?
So what I would say is that just like we hold all of our schools accountable to high standards, we're holding those who we partner with to high standards as it's our responsibility at CPS to make sure that all of our kids are getting what they need, and that this is one way of doing that.
You have historically underfunded the schools, and there are already schools that CPS has that are public schools, like the Peace and Education Alternative High School. Like, why don't you continue to create those type of schools? Peace and Education School isn't full, it's on 55th. Why can't you send kids there? Why can't you continue to do programs like that? Camelot School, your limit is what, 250 kids? You have 208 kids registered. So you're not even at capacity. This is the first year, your first year at CPS was last year, wasn't it? Maybe 2 years? Okay, there is no, why is CPS investing in new ventures that haven't even been proven to really work?
Question for CPS. Who's going to take that question for CPS?
So the question was, why invest in new opportunities, new partnerships with folks like Camelot when they haven't been proven to work? Well, I think Mr. Humphrey showed some data that shows they have been proven to work, actually. Nationally, these programs have been proven to work. And in addition, I would say to any student who is out of school right now, like the students you heard from, we can't afford to wait. There is a real need out there. There is a real need out there right now, and I know as part of CPS leadership, there's no way we could look a kid in the face who's out of school right now and say, just wait a little while. So it's important that we make sure that we continue to partner with organizations like Camelot and CPS. Any options program is subject to no longer partnering with CPS if they don't achieve performance standards.
Who's funding these schools?
The question is about funding. From who's funding the schools? Is this private funding? Is this CPS? Is this per pupil? Tell us.
Might just get my own microphone. So, just like all CPS schools, the funding follows the child. We have what's called student-based budgeting. So Camelot receives public funding, just like any other student, at the rate that every other student receives, in order to provide educational services for those students.
So are these charter schools, Mr. Camelot?
These are the Camelot, they are contract schools, which are essentially CPS schools, but in the way that because they serve option students, because they need a different schedule, they need a different calendar, they need to provide different academic services, we contract with them to give them that flexibility in order to provide the services they need for the students they serve.